Hello class, welcome to 7.6 Quadratic Equations. This will be our last section in chapter 7. Here we look at one objective, which is to use zero product property. And here's the property. It says if it's A times B that's equal to 0, then it means that either A is 0 or B is 0, or both. Okay, let's just explore this. Okay, A and B are two numbers. Okay, what they're saying is these two numbers must multiply to give you a 0. Let's think about this. If I had a 2, say a number 2 and another number 3, I want to multiply these two to get a 0. Is this true? 2 times 3 will give me a 6, not a 0. Okay? Think of some other number, maybe 10 and negative 1. 10 times negative 1 is negative 10, which is not equal to 0. That's also not true. So then if you come back to the definition, it says for A times B to be equal to 0, there is only one way, which is that either A is 0, or there could be another way where B is 0, or where both are 0. So what this means is if 2 is a number that I choose, the other number must be 0. So that 2 times 0, anything times 0 is 0, right? And if I say choose negative 1, as one of my numbers, then the other one must definitely be 0 to get a 0. If I choose the first number to be 0, the other one can be any number, because 0 times any number is going to give me a 0. So I could think of negative 2765431.76625. Okay, some crazy number. So 0 times this would still be a 0, so it doesn't matter. And well, they're saying, well, if we had both of them to be 0, that's also going to be 0. All right. So this is very intuitive, we understand. But when we actually test it out, we understand that the point is one of them should be 0. Very rarely you're going to go for both of them to be 0, right? But you do have that as the zero product property. Let's come down to this problem. What this says is x, they're asking us to solve, which means we need to find x. Okay. So this is as if the whole thing was an A, because remember A is a factor, so it should be multiplied to the other one, B. And here x plus 1 itself is grouped together, so that, in parentheses, is multiplied to x minus 4, which is also grouped. These are two factors. And we're saying if this is going to be 0, it implies that A is equal to 0 or B is equal to 0, right? As I mentioned, very rarely both will be 0. So it's either this or that, okay? So we have a parallel to A. A is very similar to x plus 1, right? In that position, I mean. Or the other factor, x minus 4 equals 0. Zero factor property, everything says there, right? 0 on the other side of the equation, and you have a factor happening. If you have factors happening on the other side, then you will set each factor to 0. So now you've got two separate problems to solve. Go ahead and get x by itself, because we're asked to solve. So x equals negative 1, or here you have plus 4 plus 4. X equals positive 4. So your solution is that we get two answers. Okay. For this expression to be equal to 0, we have x as either negative 1 or 4. Any one of them would work. If you plug them in, if you plug in negative 1 for x, negative 1 plus 1 is going to be a 0. That makes the first factor 0. No matter what the other factor is, 0 times that will give you a 0. Right? That is when you choose negative 1. When you choose 4, plug in 4 for x. 4 plus 1 is 5. So this is looking good. But if you come here, 4 minus 4 is 0. So this 5 times this 0 actually gives you a 0. So I did not show the check, but I just verified it mentally. And then I was able to understand that each one of them gave us a 0. Okay? So just remember this. Zero factor property allows us to set each factor to 0. We'll write somewhere there. Zero factor property implies to set each factor to 0. Doesn't matter how many factors you have, set each one of them to 0, because we need to figure out when the product will become a 0, and for that you have to set each factor to 0. So let's come to this problem. 5n minus 2 times 6n minus 1 equals 0. So we are required, because the other side is a 0. Remember, 0 factor property. You can't have any other number. Only for 0 will this work, right? That makes sense based on the justification I provided in the beginning. If it's any other number, this property won't work. It's only when the other side is 0. And of course, the other side has factors. So 5n minus 2 equals 0, or 6n minus 1 equals 0. This is the same as saying either a is 0 or b is 0. So each factor is set to 0. Now we go ahead and solve for n. So treat them as two separate problems. So that will be 5n equals 2. One more step. Divide by 5. N equals 2 over 5 for this part. Bring the or everywhere. And then for the second part, we get 6n equals 1. One more step. Divide by 6 on both sides. N equals 1 over 6. So this becomes a solution. As you can see, these are supposed to be real numbers. We are totally fine if they are fractions, decimals, whole numbers, integers, totally fine, it doesn't matter. As long as you can position this on the number line, it's a perfectly fine number, right? So we found the solution for n, or rather in this case solutions, because n would work for, the expression would be true. The product would give us a 0 if you had these two, 2 over 5, if you had these two answers fulfilling it. Okay. Let's come to this. 2u times 5u minus 1. As always, see if the other side is a 0. Yes, so that implies that the 0 factor property kicks in. How many factors do we have? Now, previously, we had the parentheses around the factors to help us identify how many we had. We had 2 factors here, and even in the previous one, it was very visible. But in this one, it's a little tricky. I don't see the parentheses around it. That doesn't matter. You know that if there is no parentheses or no multiplication symbol, you know in the background that multiplication is happening. So see how you can separate these two. Well, I can separate these two as 2u as one factor and 5u minus 1 as the other factor. Then go ahead and solve for u. Divide both sides by 2. U equals, what is 0 over 2? 0 over 2 is 0. Don't be confused. It's not undefined. Only if you have a 0 in the denominator, it makes it undefined. So 0 over 2, or let's come over here, plus 1. 5u equals 1. One more step. And u equals 1 over 5. So the solution is that if u takes the value 0 or 1 over 5, you're going to get this statement to be true. Thus, we solved this problem. I hope you enjoyed this section, and we've reached the end of chapter 7. I will see you in the next chapter. Thank you so much. See you soon.